Meeting will come to order. At the conclusion of opening statements yesterday, the chair called up H.R. 1206, and the bill was open for amendment at any point. And the chair now recognizes the ranking minority member, Mr. Waxman, to strike the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate this opportunity to make a statement since I wasn't able to get back from California after the Rosh Hashanah period in time for last night's or yesterday's markup. Today we mark up two health bills, H.R. 1063 and H.R. 1206. On H.R. 1063, the Medicare secondary payer bill, we have consensus. On H.R. 1206, which weakens an important consumer protection in the Affordable Care Act, we do not. The reason I oppose it, H.R. 1206, is that it will increase the cost of health insurance. In passing health reform, we took a number of steps to help hold down health insurance premiums. These provisions are working. Already Americans have received $1 billion in rebates because of the medical loss ratio consumer protection, and scrutiny of premium increases has exerted downward pressure and moderated them, resulting in another $1 billion in savings. The medical loss ratio consumer protection we enacted requires that insurers spend 80 to 85% of premium dollars on benefits and quality improvement. Administrative costs such as salaries, marketing, and profit are limited to 15 to 20%. If an insurer spends more than 15 to 20% on administrative costs, they are required to rebate consumers. H.R. 1206 weakens this protection by exempting from the medical loss ratio agent and broker commissions. Commissions have always been recognized as part of administrative costs. This bill would reverse this and cause the consumer to pay more for coverage or get less in benefits. And that's not a result we want. Already nearly 13 million Americans have received a total of $1.1 billion in premium rebates because of the MLR provision, including a number of people in this room. The average family rebate was $151. That is money that could help a family buy groceries or fix a car in need of repair. These are tangible results, real premium reductions. Less tangible but equally important is that nearly 90% of all insurers that have met the medical loss ratio requirement while continuing to pay agents and brokers commissions. Ranking Member Pallone has made a persuasive case that in New Jersey there has long been a MLR standard equal to that required by the ACA, and brokers have thrived. There's another reason to oppose this bill that is often overlooked. This bill would allow a state to effectively eliminate the medical loss ratio protections. The law allows states to apply for waivers if they can show access to agents and brokers or to health insurance would be harmed by enforcement of the medical loss ratio. This bill would expand this sensible compromise to allow states to waive an important consumer protection without proving need. That would harm consumers and increase health insurance costs needlessly. In fact, there were 10 states that sought waivers in 2011 and 2012, but could not prove access to agents or insurance would be diminished. If those unsubstantiated waivers had been granted, premiums would have been $360 million higher for at least nearly 4 million consumers in those states. Agents and brokers play an important role in the health insurance market, helping consumers choose insurance and battling with their insurers when there are disputes. And they will be able to continue to do so, helping millions of new customers under health reform as agents and brokers or as navigators. But the medical loss ratio consumer protection does not need to be weakened for this to happen. The other bill we're marking up today is the Medicare secondary payer legislation, H.R. 1063. The goal of this bill is to reduce the burdens of the secondary payer process for beneficiaries and other stakeholders in a way that makes sure we're also protecting taxpayers' dollars and the Medicare Trust Fund. We've worked hard in a bipartisan way to achieve this result. We may still have work to do with CBO and the administration before we're ready to go to the floor, but I'm confident we can continue to work together. I congratulate my colleagues who have been working on this bill on both sides of the aisle on a job well done. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Chairman yields back. Chair would recognize Mr. Rogers, the sponsor of the bill, for strike the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for working with us over the months. You set some high standards for the bill, and I appreciate you working with us to meet those high standards and get this bill passed along to the House. I just wanted to cover a few things that I think were misrepresented, certainly at the subcommittee, on some figures. Over the last week, we've heard the claim made that health insurance agents and brokers are doing just fine. Some on the other side have claimed an increase in those particular jobs, and I want to tell you that is simply not true. The misleading figures cited by members on the other side of the aisle include all types of insurance agents: life, property, casualty. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the number of health insurance agents declined by 3.3% over just the last year. Of course, we've seen the survey data indicating that 70% of health insurance agents have lost income, 15% had to close their doors altogether thanks to the MLR regulation. So a conservative estimate is about 75,000 jobs lost thanks to this one misguided regulation in Obamacare. And in a bipartisan way, over 220 co-sponsors, over 25 members of the other side of the aisle, including members of this committee, have said this is wrong. The policy wasn't designed to not allow people to earn a living. And these are middle-class folks. These are $42,000 to $60-some thousand a year positions that help small business guide their way through 2,400 pages of health care law and what's looking about 6,500 pages of regulation just to date. And when they're done, they think that may be 30,000 pages coming to a health care clinic near you. I mean, it is almost incomprehensible why we would attack the very people trying to help small business get their employees covered under health insurance, with some form of health insurance. A second claim made by some on the other side is the National Association of Insurance Commissioners hasn't seen any problem with the MLR's impact on agents and brokers. Well, this is simply, again, not true. Misleading claims cited by the ranking member is from an NAIC staff report in November of 2010, before MLR went into effect. But the fact is, the full NAIC passed a resolution in November 2012, after MLR had begun destroying these jobs, asking Congress to take action. I'd submit that resolution for the record without objection, Mr. Chairman. And here's what the resolution, again, adopted by the full NAIC, actually said. I just want to quote from just a part of it here, knowing my time is running out. We are very concerned about the impact the MLR requirement could have on the ability of insurance agents and brokers to continue assisting health insurance consumers at a time of rapid changes that makes their role even more essential. Congress should expeditiously consider legislation amending the MLR provisions of the PPACA in order to preserve consumer access to agents and brokers, and HHS should take whatever immediate actions are available to mitigate the adverse effects. And again, the rest of that, I think, resolution speaks for itself. You know, just on the debates, the average rebate per family is somewhere around $100. Premiums for their insurance have gone up a staggering $1,975. I don't know who thinks that's a good deal. Who thinks that's helping any consumer who's trying to buy health insurance? That is an absolutely disproportionate ripoff of people who are already struggling to try to pay health insurance. The number one reason people can't get health insurance is cost. What did this bill do? Raised costs, nearly $2,000 per family. You take that to the middle class and see how well that goes over, Mr. Chairman. That's not the end of premium increases in the Obamacare that will be placed on working families. Matter of fact, that's just the beginning. Wait till the second tranche of regulation starts to take hold. It's frustrating for those who are in the middle class, who are small business owners, who are struggling to try to make ends meet and make this thing work and not dump their insurance for their employees. And what we have done is succeeded in doing everything that this bill you said it intended to do. They're going to lose the health care that they like or have. They're going to pay a lot more for their health insurance, and they're going to have somebody else dictate what they can and cannot receive as coverage under their plans. And it'd be great if it was something they could dispute, but it's an unelected board of bureaucrats here in Washington, D.C., and there's 15 of them, 300 million Americans. Good luck getting your call returned. This is one small bipartisan step that said you made a big mistake. You're costing these middle-class insurance agents their jobs and the capability for them to help small business keep and maintain the right health insurance plan for the people they represent. This should be a bipartisan bill. It should be easy. It should be unanimous, and it should be done as soon as possible. I'd yield back the remainder of my time. Thank you, Mr.
Chairman's
Chairman.
time has expired. Are there any bipartisan amendments to the bill? Oh, gentlelady is recognized. Strike the last word.
Move to strike the last word, Mr.
Gentlelady
Chairman.
is recognized.
Thank you very much. I know it sounds odd, but I still want to thank the gentleman, Mr. Rogers, for offering his legislation. He works hard on his bills, I know, because we've worked together on many of them successfully, and actually created some new laws good laws for the country together. So I respect the gentleman a great deal, but I don't agree with him on this. I want to tell you all a story. It wasn't all that long ago. My daughter is a very accomplished educator, so obviously we're all very proud of her. She now is head of school at a private high school in Southern California, left the Bay Area to my disappointment, but at any rate is responsible for the entire school, as I said, the high school, adding to it because it's a fairly new school, all the challenges of reporting to a board, hiring, making sure that the students progress, et cetera, et cetera. And when I called her, asked her if she had a good day, and she said, "Mom, this was really something today. I started out the day the following way." She said the school secretary or whomever opens the mail and whatever pulled a check out, and it was for $9,000 some odd dollars. And she said, "Karen, look what we got in the mail today." And Karen responded and said, "Well, that's kind of an odd amount for someone to donate to the school." And she said, "It's not a donation, it's a refund from our health insurance company." Now, this whole issue of 80-20 is being decried. That's my experience with it so far. What happened at a private high school from an insurer, these are significant dollars. I've never heard from one constituent in the breadth and depth of Silicon Valley, doctors, practitioners, providers, insurers. I've never heard from one person complaining about this. Now, I know that the majority has said that the figures about the number of jobs from this side are being mischaracterized. Let me ask where you're getting your numbers from. I understand that they are surveys, I don't know. If they're surveys within the industry, that produces a very different, I would think, a different set of facts, because from this side, the Insurance Information Institute, which is nonpartisan, says that jobs have increased, not decreased, by 7,000 since May of last year, and by 3,100 since this past May, while the medical loss ratio, consumer protection, has been in effect. So I don't think that, in my view, you have a real clear-cut case here. And I'm not saying that to denigrate anything. This is my take on it and my experience with it. So where did you get these numbers from in terms of this huge decrease and that small businesses are being annihilated? Believe me, I have very aggressive small business startups in my district. They wouldn't, my district would not be what it is and have a global reputation were they not on the cutting edge of everything. I think I would have heard from someone on this. especially if jobs were being totally wiped out. So I think that while the medical loss ratio and what's in the Affordable Care Act is 80-20, that this is looking kind of like an 80-20 case here in the opposite direction. And I don't say that, again, to make fun of the legislation, but I just don't think that it holds the water that it purports to hold, and I say that respectfully. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. Are there any bipartisan amendments to the bill? Seeing none, are there any amendments to the bill? The chair would recognize Mr. Pallone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk that I intend to offer and then withdraw.
The clerk will report the title of the amendment,
Amendment to H.R. 1206, offered by Mr. Pallone of New Jersey.
and the amendment will be considered as read, and the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
Thank you. This is a price transparency amendment, something I know generally we have a lot of agreement on this committee. And I've previously mentioned it in my opening statement yesterday that in New Jersey, we've had a medical loss ratio that's been in effect for a while, and we also have a price transparency requirement that enables consumers to know what they're paying for the agent and broker commission, and I wanted to bring that concept up here today at the federal level. The story of New Jersey is proof that agents and brokers can not only continue to exist but flourish even if their fees are included in the MLR requirements. In '93 and then in '94, New Jersey passed their own MLR laws that required insurance companies to spend 75% of a person's premium on their health care in the individual and then in the small group markets. In that law, agents and brokers' fees were not exempted from the requirement, and that was nearly 20 years ago. And I can tell you that we've had thousands of agents and brokers with successful careers. But New Jersey didn't stop there. In 2009, they decided to increase the MLR to 80%, recognizing the ability for insurance companies to operate within these margins. And what they also did was require disclosure of what those insurers are paying agents and brokers in fees. So this amendment, Mr. Chairman, draws from New Jersey. Now, I have to say I don't support this bill because it effectively weakens the medical loss ratio requirement. And following up on what my colleague, Ms. Eshoo, said, I would point out my understanding is that the survey that Mr. Rogers mentioned is a self-reporting survey. And as Ms. Eshoo said, the Insurance Information Institute says that agent and broker jobs have increased, not decreased, by 7,000 since May, and 3,100, that's May of last year, and 3,100 since this past May, while the medical loss ratio consumer protection was in effect. So the actual institute, I don't think you can go by self-referral because that's always going to be a little bloated. The other thing I would say is that the gentleman from Michigan mentioned some vote. It was a task force of the National Association of Insurance Commissioners that recommended that they be exempt, but the full National Association of Insurance Commissioners actually had a vote to keep the agent and brokers' fees within the MLR. So I know the facts are different here. We're talking about two different things, but I would point out that I think that the full vote of the commission is much more important than the task force, and I also believe that what the Insurance Information Institute says about the jobs is much more important than, some self-reporting survey. So there's the difference. It's not that we're misrepresenting the facts. It's just different facts from different groups. But I think that the ones that Ms. Eshoo and I are indicating are more valid, frankly. I don't support the bill because, as I said, it effectively weakens the medical loss ratio requirement. But if we're going to move forward exempting agent and broker commissions from the downward price pressures, it's important to consider adding a price transparency provision. We should know how commissions fare as a result of this type of action and get the data that is maybe lacking now or there's disagreement on. In addition, as a number of colleagues supporting this bill have stated, the agent and broker commission is a pass-through. So it makes sense that a consumer should know what they're paying for this specific service and be able to decide whether it's worth it for them. Now, I want to point out New Jersey does this transparency not only for health insurance but other insurance as well, and a number of other states have a variety of disclosure laws that apply to health insurance. The bottom line is this all works in my home state. Agents and brokers make a healthy commission, typically 7%, because they add value in consumers, and the consumers are willing to pay for it. They've thrived in New Jersey because the market demanded it. And the fact of the matter is, as the ACA moves forward, there's going to be more opportunities for agents and brokers to make money. I don't see any reason why we need this bill. The agents and brokers are making money. There are more of them coming into the marketplace, and they're going to thrive even more as the ACA proceeds. So, again, I think it's really a mistake to move forward with this, given the fact that these rebates are working, people are getting the rebates. But I mainly, Mr. Chairman, wanted to draw attention to the transparency. Maybe we can deal with this later. I'm withdrawing the
Before the gentleman does that, if you just yield to me for
Yes.
1 minute. If this bill, I think you make a good point highlighting the price transparency law that New Jersey has. If this bill moves forward, then at least consumers ought to know what they are paying in agent and broker fees. They should be able to make an informed decision about whether it's worth it to them. And I think that's a point that I want to underscore about your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Waxman. I yield back.
Does the gentleman withdraw his amendment? Gentleman withdraws his amendment. Are there further amendments to the bill? Gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
I won't be too long. I've given a lot of comments about this legislation in my opening statement, but I want to focus on what this bill does in a couple of respects. Let's start with the provision that's gotten the least attention. It allows states to effectively choose whether to apply the medical loss ratio provisions to their state. We already know that the health reform law is a political football. Let's not place this important consumer protection in the field to be kicked around. Let's not allow where you live to determine whether an insurer is required to provide you the best value. Families and small businesses work hard to earn the money to pay for health insurance. This can mean the difference between a life and death or financial security or bankruptcy. Consumers rightly expect insurers to provide them value for what they pay in premiums. The second part of the bill is the part that's gotten the most attention, the part that exempts agents and broker commissions. Nearly 90% of insurers have been able to meet the medical loss ratio requirement, while the number of agent and brokers jobs nationwide have actually increased by 7,000 since last year. And in 2014, there will be millions of new people searching for health insurance. Agent and brokers will be able to help those consumers with their search, and they can serve as navigators for the exchange. Why would we weaken something 90% of insurers can clearly achieve? Why would we weaken something the National Association of Insurance Commissioners unanimously recommend? Why would we weaken something that has already lowered premium costs? The answer is that we should not, which is a reason, again, that I would urge a no vote on this bill.
Are there further amendments to the bill? Seeing none, the question now occurs on favorably reporting H.R. 1206 to the House. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. Opinion of chair, the ayes. Gentleman requests a roll call vote. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Barton. Mr. Stearns. Mr. Stearns votes aye. Mr. Whitfield. Mr. Shimkus. Mr. Shimkus votes aye. Mr. Pitts. Mr. Pitts votes aye. Mrs. Bonomack. Mrs. Bonomack votes aye. Mr. Walden. Mr. Terry. Mr. Terry votes aye. Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers votes aye. Mrs. Myrick. Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Murphy. Mr. Murphy votes aye. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess votes aye. Mrs. Blackburn. Mr. Bilbray. Mr. Bilbray votes aye. Mr. Bass. Mr. Bass votes aye. Mr. Gingrey. Mr. Gingrey votes aye. Mr. Scalise. Mr. Latta. Mr. Latta votes aye. Mrs. McMorris Rogers. Mrs. McMorris Rogers votes aye. Mr. Harper. Mr. Harper votes aye. Mr. Lance. Mr. Lance votes aye. Mr. Cassidy. Mr. Cassidy votes aye. Mr. Guthrie. Mr. Guthrie votes aye. Mr. Olson. Mr. Olson votes aye. Mr. McKinley. Mr. McKinley votes aye. Mr. Gardner. Mr. Gardner votes aye. Mr. Pompeo. Mr. Pompeo votes aye. Mr. Kinzinger. Mr. Kinzinger votes aye. Mr. Griffith. Mr. Griffith votes aye. Mr. Waxman? Mr. Waxman votes no. Mr. Dingle? Mr. Dingle votes no. Mr. Markey? Mr. Towns? Mr. Pallone? Mr. Pallone votes no. Mr. Rush? Ms. Eshoo? Ms. Eshoo votes no. Mr. Engel? Mr. Engel votes no. Mr. Green? Mr. Green votes no. Ms. DeGette? Mrs. Capps? Mr. Doyle? Mr. Doyle votes no. Ms. Schakowsky? Ms. Schakowsky votes no. Mr. Gonzalez? Ms. Baldwin? Mr. Ross? Mr. Matheson? Mr. Butterfield? Mr. Butterfield votes no. Mr. Barrow? Mr. Barrow votes aye. Ms. Matsui? Ms. Matsui votes no. Mrs. Christensen? Mrs. Christensen votes no. Ms. Castor? Ms. Castor votes no. Mr. Sarbanes? Mr. Sarbanes votes no. Chairman Upton?
Votes aye.
Chairman Upton votes aye.
Other members wishing to vote, Ms. DeGette?
Ms. DeGette votes no.
Mr. Scalise?
Mr. Scalise votes aye.
Are there other members wishing to cast a vote? Seeing none, the clerk will report the tally. So the other thing for 1063.
Mr. Chairman, on that vote, there were 26 ayes, 14 nays.
26 ayes, 14 ayes, 14 ayes. The bill is passed, and Chair will now call up H.R. 1063 as amended by the subcommittee and ask the clerk to report the title.
H.R. 1063, to amend Title 18 of the Social Security Act with respect to the application of Medicare secondary payer rules for certain claims.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point. Chair will recognize Dr. Murphy for the purpose of offering an amendment. Ask the clerk to report the amendment.
Amendment to committee print of H.R. 1063 offered by Mr. Murphy of Pennsylvania.
Chair recognizes Dr. Murphy for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
Mr. Chairman, this amendment is very simple. It really just contains some grammatical and punctuation corrections in this. And given my assumption that members of Congress are particularly astute in understanding grammar and punctuation, my assumption is that this amendment will sail through quite easily. And with that, I yield back.
Gentlemen, yield to me just to
I yield to Mr. Waxman.
affirm the fact that your amendment should sail through quickly. It's what makes this bill bipartisan, and I thank you for all your hard work.
And reclaim my time. I do want to thank personally Mr. Waxman and all members for working on this. This is an important bill, and I do yield back now. Thank you.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, the vote occurs on the amendment. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill? If not, the question now occurs on favorably reporting H.R. 1063 as amended to the House. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. The bill is favorably reported.
Mr. Chairman?
And without objection, the staff is authorized to make technical and conforming changes to the bills approved by the committee today. So ordered. The chair would recognize.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. On the first bill, I wanted to ask unanimous consent to enter some letters in the record from various groups. I know you have them. One is from the Consumers Union, the other is from the National Women's Center, United Steelworkers, and finally a big group that signed a letter. Starts with the AFL-CIO and a bunch of other groups. You have these.
Without objection, we'll
Thank
put it in
you.
the record.
Mr. Chairman, on the first bill, the minority would request the usual amount of time to enter
We'll
other opinions.
Make sure that that happens. Not a problem. Is there any further business of the committee? If not, we stand adjourned. Thank you. Yeah, I did.